I'm here today with a little bit of a different talk. I will put my hands up there. I'm trying to get you to think about simple. Disclaimer, I'm really not that clever, especially amongst my peers. There's some really clever people in here, but I would like to sort of go back to, as Marcel says, the basics and figure out like where we've come from, where we're going, and why we're going there. And I'd like to eventually lower the barrier to entry for web development for everybody. So before I start, this is me online, Luke Jackson with 2 N's, 1 N was taken. And I'm a front-end developer at Formidable. We make things out of React. And if you want cool things making with React, come talk to Yanni or any of the other Formidables that are here today. I studied computer science at Newcastle and design at Northumbria University. And that's really where this whole thing started. Soon after this, I started thinking about simple web. And this was around 2016. I just moved to Boston, Massachusetts. Now I'm a minimalist at heart. This was everything I took to America with me for a year. And this was some of the work that I did there. You can see sort of minimalist influences coming through. We made this app quite early on in my role there. This was like what I was tasked to do. I was working for CS50, which is Harvard's Introduction to Computer Science course. And David said, we need a video player. I said, cool. Can I use React? He goes, no, we're not using React yet. I go, OK, what are we using? He said, jQuery. I said, no. So I said, how about vanilla.js? He said, OK, fine. There's not much to argue about there. So when I was building this app, like we had some pretty cool features. So we had like essentially components. We got some picture-in-picture mode there. You could drag that around. We got 3D mode, searchable captions, chapters. And we did all this with vanilla JavaScript on my own weirdly made framework. And I learned a lot. Two things that I really did learn quite quickly, though, was JavaScript was lacking. This was, what, 2016 probably? And ES5 and 6 were on the horizon, but they weren't quite here yet. And browser support for the cool language features that makes JavaScript usable today were flaky at best. And there was no way of splitting up your code into modules. Like as much as we like to think it'll all fit in one file, no problems, you do have to break things up eventually. So I had a Google around at the time, and I found awesome tools like Gulp and Browserify and Rollup and Webpack and Babel and Parcel. And it got me thinking, I like web. I wasn't a compiler engineer. This isn't why I got into this game. So these tools here, they were great, but they made it really easy to pull in half the internet into your project. I do remember once, it was like a penny dropping, was David, the lecturer at CS50. He turned around from his computer screen, looking at a terminal window, just throwing text up, and said, what's this? I said, that's your vanilla JavaScript app. He goes, why is it taking so long? And he was just doing npm install inside a Docker container that had limited resources. And I started thinking, if we've been told this by a guy who does C, we're doing something wrong. And this was me. I was like, every time I came back to a project with these kind of tools, I would have some dependency or peer dependency of a subdependency of a dependency needs updating, and it's preventing me from actually building my application. I'm running node build, and nothing's coming out. I'm not seeing anything in my browser, which is the reason I was employed, to do stuff in the browser. But then Facebook came along, and they promised to deliver on simple. Create React app was invented, I don't know, like 4 years ago, maybe less. It was popularized soon after. And it promised zero configuration. All this complexity of build was behind a single dependency. And what's more, it just worked, like reliably across browsers. When I was doing coding like lessons for beginners and new starters, I would tell them to use Create React App because it would just work. It kind of gave us this like illusion of a very trivial development cycle where we write some code, we hit save, admittedly some magic happens, and the browser reloads and we see our output. These were like just like the good old days when I first started, like nearly 10 years ago. And it was certainly refreshing, at least for a lot of developer designers like me. But there was a problem. As you already know, I'm a minimalist, and I have a very minimal spec laptop. No touch bar. I don't like that. And I have 120 gigabytes spare on disk. And at some point, I got that, hey, your disk space is full. I go, OK, cool. Well, I don't have any videos. I don't have any games. I have nothing on this laptop except code. So I started digging around. And look, my app, one of my many Create React apps that I was probably making at the time. And I had to poke around and discovered something like quite shocking, I guess. At least I considered this. Each Create React app was weighing 185.7 megabytes on disk. And inside that folder, there were 28,005 items. Now, probably only 5 of those items were mine. The other 28,000 I did not put there at all. They just appeared. And this got me thinking. Now, I'm no mathematician or anything, but this works out at about 5.4 Create React apps per gigabyte, which is insane. I could feel all these sort of old legacy computer scientists, physicists, mathematicians all laughing at us. Like, this guy managed to generalize the workings of the universe in, 5 bytes? And we were taking nearly 185 million bytes to describe our React apps. So I got deeper and deeper, retrospectively thinking about this and the mess we got ourselves in, and I realized that at least a lot of us, or at least myself, had resigned a lot of responsibility to this black hole we call node modules. I thought I knew what was going on, but I really just knew what was going on through repetition on my day-to-day basis. I was doing these things. Hey, that's how Webpack works. That's how that works. Put this config there, and everything's good. But as soon as things changed, I was back to square one again, and it was very frustrating. So what did I decide to do? I took a few months off work, and I thought I'll rebuild everything myself. That'll work. So I set myself a goal of creating like a Create React app experience from scratch, steampunk style, and get back on the penny farthing, so to speak. Understand like how these tools work. It can't be that hard. Like, I'm not a genius, but I can work things out. So I wanted to go with no preconceptions and just implementing what I need doing, ideally dependency-free. So the first place I looked was Create React app repo, and here was the answer I'd or the hint I'd been looking for a long time. It said, Create React app is really good fit for these things. There are a few common cases. You might want to try something else. And top answer, if you want to try React without hundreds of dependency tools, consider using a single HTML file. I said, well, that sounds right up my street. So here's a single index HTML file. Now, it's been the pillar of web development for a very long time. Who remembers when projects just looked like this? Yeah. It was beautiful, wasn't it? What a beautiful time to be alive. But this isn't a modern web application, right? No framework. And everybody knows it's impossible to build anything on the web without a framework. So we'll take advice from the React docs again, and we'll add some script tags to our index.html. Awesome. So now we have React available globally across our application. Bitter, but OK. We'll live with that. And so we can take all our HTML that was in our HTML file and now put it inside our JavaScript file. And everyone's happy, except for I can feel you all grimacing with this repetition, which is obviously not acceptable. So to keep everybody happy, I don't know why people didn't think about this. But we'll reuse the good old dollar. Now, I know what you're thinking. How will designers and their tiny little brains comprehend three positional arguments? But we'll get to JSX soon. Please bear with me. For now, this will do. But we're in our lovely example app, a wild counter component has appeared. And we need to get that code, nice reusable code, into our app. Now, one of the luxuries of using Create React App is that Webpack will do all of this under the hood for you. It'll find the files, link them, bundle them. And I was thinking, well, how could I do this myself? Maybe I could implement a rudimentary version of Webpack. So I started looking at how Webpack works. And basically, you've got the compiler, and you draw an arrow, and that goes into compilation, and then lots more arrows. No, we are not doing this. Like I said, disclaimer, I'm not that clever. I cannot recreate Webpack. So instead, I pull on my favorite learning resource, the Fount of All Knowledge, and I Google it. Cross my fingers, and bang, top answer. How do I include JavaScript file in another JavaScript file? Sounds like exactly what I'm looking for. But wait, it's talking about Node.js. Damn, I already knew that was possible with require, but I'll click anyway. Now, this was the top answer in that side, that top answer. And it says, old version of JavaScript had no import, include, or require. Tell me about it. But since 2015, JavaScript has had the ES6 module standard, which is supported by most modern browsers. What? This sounds good. And we look at the example here. We see export and import, which is pretty much what we've been writing with Webpack all along. At the bottom here, we can see it's sort of importing some hello and using the function hello. So this really does look exactly what we want. So let's put this in our app. Our counter at the bottom, new file, export const counter is a function, just like the example. And at the top, no rocket science, import counter from components counter.js. Now, this is called a static import, and it's used as you would expect. It's evaluated sort of in sequence and is sync. I know what you're thinking, but browser support, right? That's going to pretty much be the clinch of this one. Well, no, and I was surprised too. This is, so to use import and export, you need to be inside a script type module. That's all. That is literally the defining thing here. And to use script type module, you can see is pretty green across the board. Definitely supported by all evergreen browsers. Now, what's more is that script type module is probably one of the later finalized ES6 features, which means if you're using script type module, from then on downwards, you can go ahead and use import and export, but you can also use all the other cool ES6 features that were finalized before. And that includes all the cool stuff you'd expect, like const and let, async await, object spread operators, new array and string methods. And it pretty soon dawned on me that I could probably drop Babel. If I was inside one of these files, I don't need it. I can use all the cool stuff that we get without transpiling. And that was quite an interesting revelation. But the import keyword is the gift that keeps giving, I guess, because we have a second type of import. This import is called a dynamic import, and it's a bit like the require that we just saw in the last slides. You can just say, at any point in your app, it doesn't need to be at the top or the top level, just say, go get me this thing, and then you get given the thing, and you can go ahead and do something with it. This allows you to conditionally load something, so you could say, hey, if I'm on localhost, load the development version of a file. If not, go ahead and load the production file. Seems crazy, but it works. And this is actually explained really well in the React documentation under the title code splitting. Just type code splitting React, and you will find a page which contains these extracts. Bundling is great, but as your app grows, your bundle will grow too. Cool. To get ahead of the problem, start splitting your bundle. The best way, folks, to introduce code splitting is through the dynamic syntax import. So don't take it from me. You heard it from the horse's mouth right there. Go read more about it. There's the link at the bottom. The TLDR of this, like the React team must have seen this coming at some point because they've created these two components, which are pretty useful in this scenario. One is lazy, which allows you to sort of just pass an import, and one is suspense, which allows you to load that import and render it when it's done. There is one catch, and that is that dynamic import, well, it's this guy. Good one, Firefox. It does have the little green flag, which means it's kind of supported, or it's about ready, and 67, 68 will support it, which is really good news. I don't know when those are coming out. But this was recently surfaced somewhere else, and Luke Edwards just jumped on it, and in about a week or less, 5 days, he created Dimport, which allows you to use static imports, dynamic imports, and exports in any browser all the way down to, I believe, IE9, which is mental. It does make you wonder why this wasn't done before. But anywho, we've gone, we're pretty well into our journey now, and we can strike off these two things. The problems that I was having 4 or 5 years ago are now provided by the platform for free, reliably, across all browsers. Now, I know what you're all thinking. What about JSX? What about the designers? How will they possibly code? Now, usually Babel will handle this for us. That's a given. Like, you just write JSX, and it gets converted into react.createElement calls, generally. So this time, before implementing our JSX parser ourselves, I had a quick Google, and I came across something by a package by Jason Miller, and this is a quote directly from the README. He wanted to use the virtual DOM too, and he also wanted to eschew the build tooling and use ES modules directly. Rock on, Jason. And the package is called HTM. It allows you to write, as it says, hyperscript tag, or well, JSX syntax, and it will convert it for you into, I guess, create element calls for you at runtime. This is what it looks like. It uses tag templates, which are these bits, like these backticks. This is the HTML thing. Here you can see it being used with Preact, but it covers React and some other versions of H or HyperScript. It comes with some pretty cool advantages, which are listed there. Some that I don't think you could even do if you didn't use HTM, like multiple routes in your route. Maybe I'll be corrected on that, but I don't think you can do that unless you use HTM. One thing I've noticed, a bit of a downside, is syntax highlighting is a little bit iffy. But while we're here, and this is the sort of deeper dive talk, and we're on the subject of flavors of DSL, I guess, like this is just a domain-specific language. This is one that I was playing with ages ago. You could use tuples like this to describe your views. This is pretty much equivalent of your JSX, but it's just arrays. You won't need to compile or transpile at runtime. That's the code that makes you, turns it into create element calls. It's really not much. This is another one that I came up with. You might have heard of hyperscript helpers, but this is just like the function version. It's very similar. You can extract some functions, I guess, and then just throw them in, throw in children or props. The code for this is even less. That was just that. I'm taking advantage of proxy functions here to create a new function for each call. I don't have to name all these tags, like div and span and everything. You can just ask for it, and it will use that function name to create you an element of the right name, props, and arguments. So this stuff isn't rocket science once you really start digging into it, and it's quite fun to play with. But back to the story where we were trying to get HTM into our app. Now, I looked straight on the README, as you would, and it says right here, install via npm. Well, no thank you. We've managed to eschew npm up until this point. Like, this app has literally no node modules at the moment, and I'd like to keep it that way. But you can simply hotlink from unpackage. All right. So import HTML from https unpackage.com HTML module. Right. Everyone knew that was possible, right? Now, please, can I have a show of hands? Who knew that you could import JavaScript from the internet directly in your browser? 3 people. That's 3 more than React London about a month ago. And this is React Advanced. OK. Well, at least I know I haven't wasted my talk. So yeah, when I mentioned static imports at the start, I forgot to mention that other than relative paths, you can just import straight from the internet. If you know a JavaScript file exists on the internet, just go ask for it, and it will give you the thing that is in that location. And pull it in, and parse it, and evaluate it, and cache it as bytecode, which is also insane. Now, this is made possible by a service called Unpackage. Who's heard of Unpackage before? Just another show of hands? Loads more people. Cool. Now you can use imports with Unpackage. It's a bit of a game changer, I think. It's a fast CDN mirror of NPM, which means it's just like NPM, but better, because it's not ran by assholes. Woo! It's actually ran by a really cool dude, and this dude is called Michael Jackson, the alive one. And from, he's pretty well known in the React community. You've probably heard of him. He's React training. And Unpackage itself is also backed by Cloudflare. This combination has proved pretty formidable. Hey. And as it says here, like within 1 month, it served 16 billion requests, 215 terabytes of data to 1.4 billion unique users. Like, this is kind of a big deal. So what does this look like? Let's get using it. This sounds awesome. Now, we can remove our script tags. Those script tags we put in our HTML ages ago. I removed that slide. I don't know why. But it just showed the script tags being removed. Now it's nice and generic. And inside our JavaScript files, we can import HTML. And this allows us to get rid of our dollar syntax we had earlier and replace it with our lovely designer-friendly XML-like syntax. We have to do it in both files, but that's not a problem for now. Quick side note, again, this is the deeper dive. I didn't include this slide before, and someone mentioned it. Like, always be explicit about your imports. We've been doing a project recently, and implicit imports are crazy. If you depend on some resolution algorithm figuring out which file you actually meant, just don't. Stop. It's not cute, it's not funny, it's not clever. I used to think, hey, I'm being less verbose. I'll just put the package name and hope that it picks out the right file. No, don't. And there's a few reasons for this. One is if you forget your version number, and these things are like runtime compiling, like runtime fetching, someone publishes a new version of the package you were using with a breaking change, all your customers are going to get it immediately. Like, that will be distributed out to every person who refreshes the page. You do not want that. If you are really explicit about the file you want, it will also skip the unpackage resolution steps. Like, unpackage doesn't have to figure out which files you actually mean. It'll prevent unwanted injection. Like, if you're requesting a file and then somebody malicious takes over that package and decides they're going to put something horrible up there, that'll pull straight into your client thing. So always versions are immutable in NPM, so please version your code. So we're back at here, and I'm starting to think, hey, like, what we're missing? We wanted to create this Create React app experience. For that, Create React App has already shipped a really reliable local host, so we're going to need some local host. I really like Zeitsurf, but I couldn't find anything dependency-free that ran with library loading, and I think library loading is pretty essential to our workflow. I know hitting Command R is not the end of the world, but it's something I'd really wanted to learn about and find out how it's done. I haven't got time to go into it right now. This is how it works. It's probably the lightest, smallest like static file server for single-page apps that dependency-free that exists. It's about 140 lines of code. I really encourage you to go learn it. So back to our app, we have a couple of things that are really annoying me. One is this dependency on window at the top with React, and the other one is this duplication. We'll have a look at the window one first. Now, my immediate thought was, well, this is no problem. I'll just go to one package and I'll just pull it in. And I really played for the existence of this. The question mark module actually tells unpackage to go look for the ES module build of the package. But unfortunately, you can't do this yet. Dan created this issue in 2017 stating that they would really like to support this kind of thing. But describes that it might not be easy because they don't know what the top-level exports might look like. Well, I thought, challenge accepted, and I took matters into my own hands, rolled up my sleeves, and ended up creating a package named ES-React, which is a complete rip-off of normal React. It's literally like for like. And turns out choosing the top-level domain really wasn't that hard. I just chose exactly what the UMD outputs. So. Sorry. It's probably more complicated than that, but that's what I chose. And this, prompted by Sunil, actually, a conversation is the diff of my version of React versus what is actual React. So instead of this mess of like module exports code down here, I literally say I want to export React as the default thing, and then it works. So don't worry, I've not put any crypto miners in it or anything. This is an example from the README. You can copy and paste this exact code into an index.html file, double-click on it, and it will just run. All right, no, this is React with JSX. It's using hooks. It can use suspense, everything else, and it just works. This is probably like the lowest overhead React app you could create. This is also valid HTML syntax, by the way. Cool, fun fact. So awesome, we've removed our reliance on window inside here. These files have everything they need. They don't require anything externally. Awesome, that's one little bugbear done. The second one is this duplication here. Like, I've had to do this in both files. Why can't both files sort of know about it? So I asked Jason on Twitter, what would you do, would you do this every time? Or would you sort of bind it to window, which would end up in a reliance on window? And he said he'd make it global, and I was like quite disappointed with that answer. And then Joachim, is that right? Joachim? Yeah, I think so. Sorry if I've said your name wrong, Joachim. He said, why don't you create a little module that just exports default HTML bind React create element? I was like, well, that sounds simple. Why didn't I think about this before? And then I took his idea and went a bit crazy. I took React, I took HTML, I took a CSS implementation that I'd sort of done and was playing with. I did the whole binding of React create element to HTML, which is what it needs to create the right shaped DOM nodes. I then spread out all of React, plucked out React DOM render from React DOM, and bundled it all into one little package that exposed three things, the three things that I really needed, which was React itself, HTML, and some way of putting CSS into my components. And I published that as R+, I think it's called. Yeah, R+. Now, disclaimer, it's completely untested and undocumented, but that is the documentation, and this is kind of the beauty of it. And this is really like testament to how easy it is to like piece together packages and make them make a new package. So where are we at? We add that to our app, and we've got this really nice, terse, non-repetitive like code where we just pull in the stuff we want. These two things won't be pulled in twice. Once this code here has gone and resolved that dependency. When this one asks for it later, it actually just goes and gets told, here's the bytecode for this. It doesn't even need to, it doesn't need to fetch it, and it doesn't need to evaluate it again. So no WebKit, no Babel, no worries. Which sort of brings me toward the end of this talk, which is good because I probably overran a little bit. But I've bundled up quite a lot of these learnings into Create ES React App. Bit cheeky as well. Which takes advantage of everything that I've said up until now, but also I've started to try think about how this would scale, and taking advantage of lazy to do code splitting on roots. So when somebody asks for the / root, they're going to get the home index component, if you like, and for everything else, they're going to get the not found. And this is this is from the index.js of Create ES React App. This would allow you to add infinite amounts of roots that you can match on with whatever logic you want, and not increase the size of your app at all, which is pretty cool. Now, I'm no mathematician, but from my calculations, you will probably get around 4,784 Create ES React apps per gigabyte, which I think is much more reasonable. So these, like you say, oh, it's probably all good in theory, but is it working in practice? Yes, I've made 3 apps so far with this. I say, like it's a big deal. But this one is called GistLink, and it pretty much takes this in essence. You can write code here, and it will evaluate and run it in an iframe here. This is all client-side, no servers involved. If you make a code change, we're going to evaluate it like immediately. There is no build step here. That is real-time building, which is really nice. Obviously, it's a very small file, but the simplicity of this is quite compelling, I think. Another one we have is we've been working on at Formidable recently, and this allows us to inspect packages. One real shortcoming of being able to import stuff so easily is that people are going to go and import everything. And that's why we made this. You can take an unpackaged URL. Nope, that's not that. I didn't do live coding in the last one. But if we go to unpackage, this is what the file we would usually see, not that. We would usually get given a file like this, and we wouldn't really know what's going on there. But if you asked for add.js somewhere there, who knows what add's going and pulling in as well. It'd be really nice if you could follow that. So to do that, we add an R in front of there, and it'll take us into here. We can see add.js, the size of it, and sort of slowly start to explore it and its dependencies. We hope this will make it a little bit easier to know exactly what you're importing. I realize I'm very short on time now, so I'm going to miss the other demo. We made one called Perflink the other day. It's built on the same architecture, it's front-end only. It helps you race JavaScript. This kind of did hit a nerve with Sean Larkin, who is the advocate of Webpack. And he actually came in with Perflink in particular and said, hey, what if you added Webpack to this project? He's done, the issue is still open. You can go read it. It's quite an interesting read. At the end of the day, I said thanks, but no thanks. But he makes some interesting arguments, I guess. Quick disclaimer, like these are a few of the things I've thought there might be shortcomings of this approach. I've kind of given little counters to them. These slides will probably be available at some point, but they're interesting things to think about. But to summarize, the landscape is changing. With a fundamental shift of paradigms, you're going to see resistance, and people are going to find edge cases. But like I've seen a lot of architectures and a lot of apps in my time, 10 years of web development, and I think the simplicity of ES modules will prevail, and it probably is suitable for like 90–95% of major use cases. But I'd like you to challenge that, or try it out at least, and let me know how it goes. Until then, please and thank you. Follow me a bit on Twitter.